Hi everyone, I'm Casey J. Adler, co-creator of PICplays. Please welcome Deborah Meier, who ranks among the most acclaimed leaders of the school reform movement in the United States. She's on the editorial board of The Nation, the Harvard Education Letter, and Dissent magazines. Please give a silent applause in the comfort of your home. Take it away, Deborah.
Thank you, thank you. Oh my goodness, you know, when you're 89 years old, these Zoom things are very confusing. But I want to announce that I'm not really a school reformer. In fact, the word has a bad resonance to me. I'm a teacher. I was a kindergarten teacher for a very large part of my life. And then I got some friends together and we started a bunch of little schools that were models of what democratic education might be like if we cared about democracy. And I want to start off by saying that why I say if we cared about democracy, because there's a lot of evidence that we don't. And one of them is the way we run our schools. If democracy is such a great idea for running a nation, why is it such a bad idea apparently for running a school? Comparatively simple compared to the nation as a whole. And yet it's one of the most authoritarian institutions that I know of. I think it's in some ways more authoritarian than the army, maybe equivalent to prison. But in any case, I think what we have in this country is what I would call an oligarchy with democratic features. And those democratic features are not to be sneezed at. They were hard won. Remember when the nation was started, the only people who got educated were essentially the ruling class. And over the years, we started educating other white people, and finally we thought maybe we should, in parts of the country, we thought maybe we should educate Black and brown kids. And we have gradually, when I was born, high school was almost non-existent. Nobody dropped out of high school because very few kids dropped in. So what we think was the modern school system is relatively a new idea. Now, it's not a new idea for the ruling class, except that in a democracy, we're all supposed to be members of the ruling class. And as such, we weren't prepared in this country because we never thought we should give all children a ruling class education. What's the difference between, even when we started educating most kids, or all kids, the experience they had over 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years had a lot to do with how much wealth their families had and the color of their skin. Poor white children, as well as, of course, all Black children, received an education to be ruled, not to be rulers. And the amount of money spent on them and the size of the classes were nothing like what the rich provided for their children. They attended private, largely progressive and very expensive school. In New York City, it costs $50,000 to send your kid to a private school, and that doesn't include all the gifts that rich people give the private school to help them spend even more money. And aside from what they do Saturday, Sunday, summer vacations, holidays, and so forth, that poor children don't have access to. So, but it's also the way they treat people. And that was a shock to me because I happened to have gone to one of those progressive private schools, and I never knew what it was like to be treated with so little respect. Not just the children were treated with little respect, but adults, parents, and teachers. My children went to Chicago public schools, and the message I got was that on the whole, I shouldn't enter the school. I should stay out of the school business because it was a nuisance for parents. I was treated with some respect by the teachers, but it was minimal. And when I started subbing in most of the all-Black schools in the south side of Chicago, it was as though the whole school thought there was going to be a riot any moment. Every attention was paid to law and order. And as a sub, they knew I was fairly helpless, so I got the disorder part of it. I even once went down to the principal's office and said, I'm leaving for the day because the children are safer when I'm not in the room. But I knew what it was like to feel respect, to know what it was like to treat parents with respect and communities and children, because I had been lucky and privileged to have experienced respect. You know, people would sometimes say you're treating him like a child, but even as a child, I experienced being treated with respect. And not even the adults in New York, in Chicago, and then later New York, public schools was treated with respect. Teachers were yelled at in public. They were not assumed they didn't know enough to develop their own curriculums or handle their own classrooms. And they were given scripts, essentially pacing guides. And if they went, even the school secretary, and I don't mind that fact that the school secretary was treated with respect, but she certainly, it was minimum respect, but it was more than teachers received. And this was true in school after school. You were treated as teachers, as adults, more or less with the respect that your children were seen to deserve. The lower you were on the pecking order, the less respect. Whether you were teaching low income or Black children, being their parent, that determined how you were treated by the school and a lot of other institutions too. But they were taught in school to know your place. And certainly democracy was the last thing on anyone's mind and the last things children learned about. They may have at some grade or other learned something about the Constitution or the balance of power and so forth, but they had absolutely no idea and no experience with people speaking their mind, people questioning power, people having discourse with each other, arguing, and neither did the adults know. When I first started teaching in New York, some of the younger teachers would come to me. I was considerably older by that time than they were, and asked me if I would bring up a subject at the staff meeting. And I said, well, why don't you? And they said, because you can get away with it, but we can't. To add to this, the schools ranked and sorted children by wealth and status and the color of their skin, but they also ranked them and sorted them by tests. And tests were, I discovered to my shock, because I had always done well on them, and so I thought they were very good. But tests, it turned out, are really rigged, and that isn't too strong a word. They are designed, by design, they are designed to primarily indicate the community children belong to, their wealth and their status and their race. And if you wanted to know how much money some family made, the best indicator would be to look at their test scores. And that's not an accident. It's because the test makers designed the test. If an item was scored, Black kids did better than white kids, and that item was removed, not used in the test. If a rich child got an answer wrong that a poor child got right, that item was removed. There was essentially no way to change the test score gap. And the same with choice. Choice can sound good, but choice in a system of great inequity means that we of public education, that so-called common we, the citizenry, is again ranked and sorted into different schools of choice. And the marketplace makes sure you're in the right place. So in essence, if you want to know more about that, you can look at this book, These Schools Belong to You and Me. and why we can't afford to abandon our public schools, but it's also about how we cannot afford to continue to distort the education that young children get in a country that calls itself a democracy. Schools can be democratized, and I have living proof of it. I know dozens of schools started by myself and friends that included parents, teachers, staff, and children and students in the democratic process, and they were successful, not only in the usual way of thinking of it, but those children were different. Those children thought they ruled the world.
Thank you so much, Deborah. If you're interested in further developing the democratization of schools, please pick up her book, The Power of Their Ideas. It's incredible. Now enjoy the show, and please stay with us after all three plays for a Q&A with the playwrights. And get this book, These Schools Belong to You and Me.